Good morning. I'm with Philippe,
Morning.
Blandinieres, just at Chateau M in Chateau de Montravel, and we're just going to give a little history of the estate and the area, and a little bit of rationale behind the project. Philippe.
Okay, so we are on the site of Montravel. Montravel used to be a town up to the 17th century and was totally destroyed during the religious war by the Catholic. The town was a Protestant stronghold and was actually totally erased. The chateau of Montravel dates from the 15th century and was unfortunately also totally destroyed during that event. There was a royal ban on building on the plateau for 100 years, and so the chateau was rebuilt, but a century later, and was enlarged in the 19th century, end of the 19th century. So the property is actually located on the grounds of the town, the old town.
Oh, okay. Did you and when did you purchase the property?
In 2008.
2008.
Yes. And wine and making wine has always been a dream, a passion. And when I bought this property in 2008, it was the unique occasion to actually start making wine. So I acquired some vines.
Because wine is not, wineries are not your background.
No. I am trained as a lawyer, and I run my own company since 30 years now.
But that's not law. That's not in the legal practice.
No. I have left the legal practice quite a long time ago to start buying companies and running them. And so I'm today running companies that makes machinery for the industry. So far away from the wine world. But wine was always something that I always wanted to make and to drink. And so decided to start this business, or it's not really a business, but this hobby, and started in a garage at the end of the day. Found that working in a garage was not really what I wanted to do, and therefore built this winery in order to have a proper, modern and efficient tool to make the wine I wanted to make.
Fantastic. When you bought the property, did you buy it because of the terroir, or you bought it because of or was the terroir just the luck, or because this is a history of, it's quite special land, huh?
No, I would be honest, and I would say no, it's a pure luck. We started to look for a house in the southwest with the idea that we could make wine, but the first priority was the place for the chateau and the house. But of course, when we saw the house, we loved the house, but in the same time, I could see immediately, because it's surrounded by vineyard, that would be the place to make wine.
Yeah, but it's not just vineyards, because just across the river in Entre-deux-Mers, there's a lot of sandy, very average soil, and here you are sitting between Saint-Emilion and Bergerac, and it's quite special land in terms of terroir.
Yes, it's we have the same soil and the same climate as Saint-Emilion.
But in Saint-Emilion, it's not always special, huh? Because there's many area that are on the flat plains and things, and not on the tongue of limestone. So becomes. So are you on the flat plain, or are you on the limestone?
No, you're right. We are on top of the hill, obviously, and we are on the limestone. And we have a very, very fine layer of clay, and then pure limestone. So it's a very cold soil. It's a very poor soil, but it's the kingdom of Merlot. That's very clear. In opposition to, as you said, the left bank, where we have sandy soil and therefore warmer soil, which is basically Cabernet land.
Okay. And what about what your decision when you came to walk away from the Montravel appellation and to make Vin de France?
Yeah. Basically, I even though I was not from the world of wine, I always knew what I wanted to make because I always knew what I liked. And I wanted to have a wine that would be produced with the best grape for the soil I had. And I wanted concentrated wine, I wanted structured wine, and therefore I had a very clear idea on which type of grapes I was going to use. And in our case, Semillon, pure Semillon for the white and pure Merlot for the red. Because of the regulation linked to the appellation Montravel, I was more or less forced to blend if I wanted to use the appellation and to blend several grapes. And I decided that I was not interested in doing that. I did not understand why I would have to follow something that I thought was not the best to produce wine. And so I decided not to follow the rules of the appellation, and therefore I went to the Vin de France that gives me total liberty in terms of what I cultivate and what I do with my wine.
And the amount of grapes you have on white and red?
I have 4 acres of Merlot and 2 acres of Semillon. And I have 3 rows of Chardonnay. But that's
Well,
another story.
That's an experimental plot.
That's an experimental plot, exactly.
And what's your dream? What would you like ultimately to have?
Well, in terms of size, I'm very happy with what I have. My aim is certainly not to produce a lot of wine. We produce 7,000 bottles of red and about 3,000 bottles of white yearly. And that's good enough. Our yields are extremely small. And the reason for that is that I try to concentrate the energy of the plant on a very limited amount of grapes. So we do green harvest, we try to reduce, we're not pushing the vineyard to produce a lot of grapes.
And you planted the grapes in 2008 after you arrived?
No, the vineyard I bought was already planted. However, a lot of plants were missing because it was an old, the average age was 60 years old, and a lot of, about 35% missing. And so what I did was replanting, co-planting, which means planting where the plants were missing, on the red. And on the white, I planted half an acre new, totally new. So I have, in the white, I have half an acre of old vines and half an acre of new vines.
Because the vines that were there were Semillon and Merlot originally?
Exactly.
Okay, so you were...
But I picked that vineyard specifically because it was Merlot and Semillon.
Perfect. Do you have when you came in from other businesses and now you're an entrepreneur in many businesses, is where does your winemaking skill come from? Because you obviously had a vision of what you wanted to do.
Yeah. Well, I come from the south of France. I come from the French Catalonia. And part of my family was in the wine business near Perpignan. So wine was always something near the family. And then I have many friends that are producing wine, some in Saint-Emilion. And so I had a fairly good knowledge of how to make wine, even though I did not actually made it in the past.
Do you have a consultant or a mentor that you use as advisor? Or?
No, I don't have a consultant, but what I do is I have a very, very good friend that used to be in charge of a Grand Cru Classé in Saint-Emilion, who, when I am in doubt, I can phone and he is able to say, look, I think that you should do that or that.
50-50 or phone a friend.
Exactly.
Perfect. And in terms of describing the winemaking, the influences, obviously your red wine is, I'll be honest, it reminds me a lot of Saint-Emilion Grand Cru, so there's no surprise there.
No.
And the oak that you're using is obviously playing an important role. It's
Yes.
You're making serious wine.
Yes, I follow the same rule as the Grand Cru Saint-Emilion in terms, as I said, de-leafing partially, green harvest in the vineyard because it starts in the vineyard, and then a proper destemming machine, a proper sorting table, a lot of cold maceration before we start the fermentation, and then a very long and temperature controlled fermentation. And a very regular pumping over, which means that I do a lot of extractions. The wine I produce are extremely colored, extremely concentrated, and so they are ready for a long aging in wood. So I age them. I'm speaking about the red now. I age the red for 18 months. Where I differ from the Saint-Emilion Grand Cru is that I do not only use a French oak. I blend French and American oak. I use about 35 to 40% new wood every year on the red. Out of this, 1/3 is American oak, 2/3 French oak. Same toasting. I do that because, unlike what a lot of people, sometimes snobs, says, the American oak is very good, but you should be careful when you are using it. It tends to give the perfume or the flavor of the wood faster than the French oak, and probably not for such a long period. So it means that it's very intense, but then it just decreases very quickly. Whilst the French oak will be the reverse. It will be slow to give the flavor, but then it will last for longer years. So if you, like I do, blend American oak, new French oak, and one wine a barrel, then you succeed in having something which is very balanced and not aggressive. And for the white that I also barreled and aged for 9 months in barrel, it's also a blend of American and French oak, but with a large majority of French oak.
And a lot of lees contact for the white.
The white is fermented in the barrel, and then it's matured on lees for 3-4 months. Then we take the lees out and we just age the wine without the lees. Keeping the lees for a long time can have some problems in taste, and can have some illnesses that comes from the lees.
Okay, let's go and have a quick look inside the winery, and then see the wonderful chateau.
Okay, so sorry, it's not.
No, it's
So that's the barrel room.
it looks like a Grand Cru.
Thank you.
No, I didn't realise you were using. I'd forgotten you were using the French and American oak.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it looks. So you only built this winery after you purchased the chateau, then?
Yes. As I was explaining, we started producing wine from the garage of the chateau because the original winery in the chateau had been transformed in the 70s into garages. And so what I did is use the garage back into a winery. But obviously what I wanted to achieve is what you see now, and I couldn't do that in a garage, no way. So I had to invest into that.
Brilliant. Do you have a particular wood cooperage that you like to use?
Yes, I use Quintessence. It's an American cooper. They're based in Bordeaux, but it's owned by an American. So those are the cans. Those are the kinds we use for fermentation. We do not use them for aging. We only use them for fermentation processes. This is synthetic material that has the same micro porosity than wood. So there is a bringing of oxygen during the fermentation process, which is a very, very important thing. It is made in the US, and the Americans use this to age because they have the micro-oxygenation of the barrel, and they put the chips inside, so they have the flavor of the wood. I never age anything in there, I only ferment in there.
Amazing. Now tell me I see there's lots of lovely art around the buildings and the chateau. Tell me a little bit about Annette. She's obviously an artist and producing films, so she's quite busy.
She's a very busy bee. Yeah. She's a sculptor, and she's now starting a film or producing a film on the history of Montravel. So the film will be half in the time of the Montravel crisis and the Montravel destruction, and nowadays in the confinement period. So that should be fairly interesting.
And where obviously she had a little influence on the label design and
she designed the label. She has a total influence on the label. She was the one that designed the label. She's the artist in the couple. So
it's a beautiful, beautiful location, sitting on top of the hill.
Yes. Would you like to go and see the vines?
We could see the vines. Yeah. Talk of the devil, she's on her way back.
Oh yes, that's true. Forever. It's up to you with your...
I mean, obviously food has played a very important role for you in the whole way you live your life, and you love to cook.
Yes, I love
Gastronomy is something. How was that important for you with the considerations of style of wine and things?
Yeah, well, I would not go to the extent of saying that we produce a wine because we had in mind some food. That would not be the reality. But yes, for me, the wine I produce are not really aperitif wines. They are wine that are pairing very well with food because of the acidity, because of the concentration they bring in aromas, in strength, in the structure they have, which means that they do pair extremely well with food. Of course, not with any kind of food, but the acidity allows the white, for example, to pair extremely well with rich food, creamy cheeses, lobster in cream sauce. Those will be fantastic with the Semillon. The Merlot goes more with stews, roast. Just a simple roasted chicken will be extraordinary with that Merlot.
Ooh, sounds delicious. And have you had to work on the gardens much, or were they always pretty?
No, they were not that pretty when we bought the chateau, and we had a lot of restoration in the park, in the chateau. So yeah, we had to spend a lot of energy in reclaiming the formal beauty of the park and the chateau.
And it sits right on the top of the hill with the Dordogne River. We
Exactly.
can almost see the Dordogne River from here.
Yes, you can see on the other side of the valley the left bank of the Entre-les-Mers, the vast extent of land between here and the other river, La Garonne, which constitute the Entre-deux-Mers. And so on that side you have Bordeaux and Saint-Emilion, and on the other side, the east side, you have Bergerac.
Yeah, it's you've certainly done a beautiful work on the chateau.
So that part of the chateau is the 19th century part, built on this terrace that originally was 18th century and was just a part of the garden. So the original chateau was not built on the terrace. The terrace was just part of the park as a panoramic view for the view, but was not linked to the chateau. It was only in the 19th century that happened.
Very cool, very beautiful spot, and a gorgeous autumn day.
Yes. Yes, the colors start changing.
And tell me a little bit about the various vintages. The first vintage you produced was 2012.
Yes, we started producing white wine only, and I thought originally, why producing white wine first? I thought, well, I'll have only half an acre. That was the first vine. The vineyard I bought was only, the plot was only half an acre, half a hectare, so an acre. And I thought, okay, I will experiment and I'll see if I can make wine, basically. And so I only produced 1,000 bottles in 2012, same amount in 2013. And then after 2 years, I felt fairly comfortable in making the wine, and I thought, okay, I can now make more of the white and red. And so I bought more land. That's when I bought the current plots I have, and I started producing the red. And why did I start with the white? Because I thought that the white would be easier to produce than the red. And actually, it's much more difficult to produce a good white wine than a good red wine.
Yeah. And the vintages that you have, let's talk from 16, 17 to 20. What's the differences, and did you have any struggles?
16, yes, I would say that these vintages from 16 to 19 were very similar. 16, 17, 18 are extremely similar vintage, similar type of...
17 there was some problems with pourriture, some rot in the vineyards?
Not in our case. 17 has been a bad year for a lot of growers because they had frost, they had hailstorm, some rot, but mainly the hailstorm that destroyed the hailstorm in the beginning of the summer that destroyed a lot of crop. We were not affected at all. So for us, 2017 was a perfectly normal year in terms of quantity and in terms of quality, unlike many other of our colleagues. So 16, 17, 18, very similar type of wines, both for the red and the white. 19th and 20 are different stories. The climate was, the weather was extremely warm in 19. And so we have wines that were with a high content of sugar, high content of alcohol therefore, and it was a struggle to achieve fermentation because the yeast was couldn't make up. I mean, it was impossible for the yeast to absorb all the residual sugar, so we had to be very careful in what we did with the yeast, making sure that the yeast will go until the end of the fermentation, therefore very slow fermentation, bringing some oxygen by emptying the tanks and so on and so forth. So we do have two vintages that will probably have a less capacity of aging. In other terms, my normal vintage would do 10, 15, 20 years easy in your cellar. but I think 19 and 20 will probably go down to 10 are their best. It's my guess. But otherwise, the characteristic of the wines is very, very similar from one vintage to the other.
Fantastic. Lovely talking to you, Philippe, and let's hope we can help you, assist you in some way in the future with
I hope so.
yeah, with the wines.
Thank you very much.